on to passives and jewel discussions. So we start off as a Scion, and this is a level 84 Scion. So the reason we choose Scion over Shadow, like the previous iteration of the build, is very simple. Jewels. Jewels are so strong. Especially if you get well-rolled rare jewels. But we'll get into that in a minute. So we'll just go over sort of passive tree discussion. So get out of here, go to Harrier, pass this jewel slot, not level 85, but you want to grab that at 85. Go up to coordination, bunch of attack speed, life, trickery, and then blades. Ignite chance, 5%. This is the first place you get ignite chance of the build. Very, very important. Go over here, grab frenzy charge, completely necessary. Love frenzy charges. Grab acro, phase acro. The reason you grab acro, by the way, is really just because as a two-hander build, you're not going to be able to utilize block. And as a result, the only thing you're really missing out on is the armor. And I feel like in this build in particular, it's sort of hard to get your hands on a fair amount of armor. You don't go by Iron Will. I know that's Iron Reflexes. I know that's not quite as popular as it used to be. People like to sort of do a balance of either, and I feel like that's a strong argument. But I feel like if you go, acro and you're running a Granite and you have, a few okay armor pieces on gear, you'll be all right. So grab acro, just very point efficient defense. Grab fervor, the evasion per frenzy charge is nice. Grab herbalism, increased life recovery from flasks is nice. It's efficient health as well. And that's pretty much all you're going to grab on the shadow side. For more health, you could go over to blood drinker. You also have hired killer on hand if you want that. If you're trying to run a different aura setup, you can go over to charisma. Probably wouldn't suggest it. Alright, so then left side. So left side, take the region, which is actually sort of nice for the build because we run off blood magic. Constitution, just efficient health, more strength, resolute techniques, you need it. Not going to be able to reasonably get accuracy or crit on this build at a 5% base crit chance. Aura Sacrifice is not a good candidate for a crit build. You grab Barbarism, increased max fire res is nice, decent life nodes as well. Grab Devotion into Catalyst, very strong node for this build in particular. Elementalist, another great node. Discipline and Training, Retribution, very strong. 5% increased attack speed plus 14% melee damage is just very good for this build. Grab Celestial Judgment and Celestial Punishment, sort of self-explanatory, but the damage pen is nice. The increased chance to free shock and ignite is very strong. You really want it in this build. That's another reason why you grab Elementalist. Grab the fire damage, preferably. Purity of Flesh. It's nice to get the sort of free chaos res. Go up, Whispers of Doom, additional curse. I really love dual cursing in this build, and I really recommend it if you can swing it. And it's really not that hard since you go by it rather conveniently. Cruel Preparation, very strong, and then Breath of Flames for the 5% and Ignite Chance 5% over here. So in total we get 10% Ignite Chance here. We get 5 here, another 5 here, so that's a 20%. And then another 5 here, so we get a grand total of 25% Ignite Chance off the tree fairly comfortably. 20% off of Auros puts us at 45% with just Auros and our tree. And then with the Mokus, another brings us up to 63%. So those are sort of your passive options. Talked a little bit about, different ways you could go about it. Don't really recommend Amplify. AoE isn't really that important in this build. You ignite pretty frequently enough. You can get additional ignite chance over here. I don't really like it because you don't benefit from the burning damage really at all. I mean, you don't benefit from the burning damage over here, but at least you get increased fire damage and more ignite chance at the end of it, so it's a bit more efficient at the end of the day. And then, you have a few options. There's more life over here. just slot in as, you know, required. More life here. You could go for some endurance charges if you want to run more endurance charges. The build has access to a fair amount of nodes that are going to increase your survivability rather readily, and you just sort of pick and choose which ones you want. You can drop a bit of ignite chance if you want to. Like I said, I feel like 50% right now is sort of the baseline of where you'd want to be, so 63% isn't entirely necessary. I did forget one thing actually, so it brings you to 61%. This jewel gives me 2% chance to ignite, so that brings you to 63. But let's go ahead and talk about jewels now. And jewels are very, very important because the reason you go Scion is for the ease of access to these 4 jewel slots that the build paths by, and why they're so strong. So, just sitting in my base with my auras up, I'm at 4.7k average damage. So this is an ideal jewel in 2 instances. The increased fire and the increased melee damage are going to give you pretty much the most damage per point you can get out of jewels. Increased melee damage being a little bit better than fire damage, especially if you run Wrath over Anger for shocking outside of the 3 Dragons setup. So 4.7k with this jewel. Without this jewel, 4.4k. So you're losing a fair amount of damage, about 300 or so average damage, which is a very large amount for this build. Ultimately, that's going to be about 8 or 9% damage right there. This is not quite as good of a jewel. You get the increased fire damage, and it's better if you run more fire damage, but the increased ignite chance is nice. Increased physical damage with axes, obviously not useful, but this sort of showcases another potential jewel role that you can get, which is ignite chance, which is another strong option, especially if you want to sort of forego this cluster. If you can get 4 jewels with 2% ignite chance on all of them, you can pretty much just forget this, and that's going to save you about 5 points right there. And that's sort of the beauty of jewels, is that in a perfect setup, it's just beyond belief that these jewel sockets are more powerful than anything you could possibly get on the tree, if they're rolled well. And then lastly, we have this jewel, which is increased life, 7%, which is very nice, increased melee damage, also very nice, and increased damage over time. Once again, you don't really care about your ignite damage. You're pretty much using it exclusively for the frenzy charge generation, so not a very good roll. But it does sort of showcase the last, or one of the last good rolls. So an ideal jewel, if you could roll all of these things, would be increased fire damage, increased melee damage, ignite chance, and life. You can also roll attack speed with weapons, swords, two-handers, etc. But as I sort of said previously, you don't really care about attack speed all that much. It's still good, it's a good stat, but it's not going to be your strongest. You're going to care more about melee damage and fire damage than attack speed. And ignite chance, like I said, if you can get enough of it, you can sort of forego some of the nodes on the tree that give you ignite chance. You'd still take this, you'd still take this. You might get rid of Blaze, but 20% fire damage is pretty solid. But you could potentially get rid of this cluster with enough damage and instead go hard of flame. So that's sort of the ideal jewel setup, is ignite chance, melee damage, fire damage, life. Not even sure if you can actually roll all of those, but that would be the dream. So I feel like that's, sort of gone over passives and jewels pretty adequately. Talked about, the dual cursing change that I made from the last iteration of the build. Definitely talked about jewels. Jewels are just number one. Get well-rolled jewels. Be super happy. They're going to just increase the clear speed of this build substantially. And pretty much covered